we will get rolling, and I would ask our Secretary Treasurer, Rebecca Aguilar, to please read the roll.
Good morning, everyone. Patty Newberry.
Is here.
Matt Hall.
Here.
Rebecca Aguilar. Here. Taylor Murfandersky.
Here.
Tess Fox. Mike Riley.
Here.
Erica Carvajal. Yvette Walker.
Here.
Lauren Bartlett.
Here.
Thank you.
And we also have joining us Andy Schatz, serving as parliamentarian should we need him. So thanks, Andy. First order of business is to consider the minutes from our last official board meeting, which was June 27th. Do I have a motion to adopt the minutes?
So moved.
Thank you, Lauren Bartlett. Do I have a second?
Can I? A couple of quick corrections in there.
Let's do the second, and then we'll take the
Okay.
questions, Matt. Do I have a second on the minutes? Thank you, Matt Hall. And Matt, since you began, do you have questions or corrections for the minutes?
Yeah, I just would note that Taylor and Erica's last names and Bob Shapiro's last names are spelled incorrectly.
Thank you very much. Lauren Bartlett, do you have a question or comment?
I sent a couple of corrections to Jennifer. I can read them aloud if people want. They're very small, so if I can put them in chat.
Why don't you put them in chat? I likewise have two small typos that I'll send directly to you, Jennifer. They don't change the meaning of any of the content. And with those updates, all those in favor of the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? The minutes are passed. All right, thank you very much. So you saw in the packet that I submitted a president's report, and I just want to hit a few highlights as we go through a pretty packed agenda. So first of all, it was, as we know, a very unusual year for all of us in our real lives and in our SPJ lives. And despite all those challenges, I do think that society was able to move forward on some important fronts this year, thanks to all of the efforts of many, many people, staff and volunteers alike. So I would like, of course, to commend John Schertzer as our executive director. He's done a phenomenal job since joining us on December 2. We all know that we pivoted to a virtual conference, and it's been it's been a delight. It's been shockingly smooth. Of course, I'm not on the staff and making everything happen, but since making the decision at the end of June and beginning the real work at the beginning of July, just a tremendous amount of work has been done and gotten us to this point. You see in today's packet, we're in the black on an operating budget, and you know, some prior meetings, we spent a lot of time talking about being in the red. So having an $80,000 swing to the positive is a high note for me as your board president. We have, at last, at many years, we have solved the database issue, and we are moving toward final implementation of Impexium, and that's very good news indeed. Just a reminder to mute yourself so that we don't get the background noise. We've brought along an education director, which is very great news. And we today are considering the final step in a long number of years of restructuring, moving our board to a smaller size, and now considering the first year plan of our strategic plan that we've been working on for a good number of months. And so with that, I also just want to take a moment here to offer thanks to a good number of people. I'll be brief, but I don't want to wait until the very end because I know sometimes people can't stick with us to the very end. So certainly want to thank our departing board members, and that would be Mike Riley, Tess Fox, Erica Karzabal, and Taylor Murfandersky. I probably missed a syllable in there again. Taylor, many apologies. Erica and Taylor, you're not quite off the hook, of course, because you will serve on the board until your replacements are named, in as much as you are appointees. Of course, want to thank our continuing board members, Matt Hall, who will be your next president, Lauren Bartlett, and Yvette Walker, who will continue on the board. And special thanks, of course, to Rebecca Aguilar, who is standing for re-election to the next position as she continues her SPJ journey. Want to thank all of our committee chairs, our community chairs, and our regional coordinators for their great work this year. We'll get to their reports as we go through the agenda. I want to offer special thanks to Matt Hall for leading the Strategic Planning Task Force this year, and to Narissa Young for leading the Sponsorship Task Force. Special thanks to our conference committee, all of the volunteers who worked with staff to put together the particulars for SPJ 2020, and of course to our fantastic staff, John and all of the staff members for getting us so far in such a difficult, challenging year. So that is the end of my remarks. I do want to circle back on one thing while I still have the mic, and it is related to the minutes, but not adjustments to the minutes. As I read the minutes, I wanted to acknowledge that the board and the staff accepted advice from members who came on the last call in regards to the shape of a digital conference, a virtual conference, the length of time and so forth. There was a strong desire to have 2 days instead of 1. And so we heard that and we responded accordingly. We had input on the Strategic Planning Task Force that was valuable as we continued that work. And also there was a suggestion from members to have a forum on Impexium, our new database, and we quickly did that. So I'm always happy when we can satisfy member requests following up from board meetings. I would also say that in the last minutes, we talked about the negotiations to exit our contract with the Hilton in Washington, D.C., and that ended well. And I'm sorry, those are my dogs. They are outside, but if you hear barking, they're getting ready to walk. So I also want to thank everyone involved in helping us resolve that sticky issue well. Also want to acknowledge that in the minutes we talked about the need for our committees to continue to be in touch with each other, even though we don't have the physical structure of a conference for them to be in the same room. So I do encourage all of those committees to make time for their own meetings outside of SPJ 2020. And last, I want to acknowledge that our long and fruitful relationship with RTD&A has come to an end for the time being. We had worked with them for the prior 9 years as our lead conference planning partner, and do hope that we have a future relationship with our friends on the TV side as we look to future conferences. And with that, I will turn it over to John Schertzer, our Executive Director, for his report, which you've seen, and anything he'd like to add to that verbally.
Thanks, Patty. Hello, everyone. And I'll just kind of continue on the train of thanks that she had started, and just saying thank you to the current board and especially our departing board members. Coming on to this team as a brand new staff leader, you know, it was obviously a turbulent several months to try to get this job figured out, to get this organization, to understand the organization, and in the midst of that to have a pandemic and several other things impacting our world. And you all have been very supportive along the way, but you also haven't let me off the hook. You've pushed, you've challenged, you've made us all better. And I appreciate that. And I hope those who are departing, we still stay connected very strongly, and you stay connected to the work of SPJ. My report speaks a lot of the things that I'm proud to share. And maybe before I go further into that, I do want to acknowledge we do have staff members on the call today. So glad to see a lot of our staff team join the group, the meeting. We do have some that will participate in some of the reports. And so it is a holiday weekend, and they're here on a Saturday, and I really appreciate that they took the time to do that. Big thanks for them on that, as well as giving up another weekend next weekend to pull off SPJ 2020. So
join the meeting.
SPJ is weekend work, and we understand that, but it still bears thanks. So, and then on the actual report, the only thing I'll add is, you know, we're going to have a busy few months ahead of us too. So once we get through SPJ 2020, we're going to have a lot of things to complete the calendar year, including the transition to Impexium, which I still believe will be a big game changer for SPJ. So we want to do that well. We want to get everybody, especially staff and lead volunteers, trained on the system. And then we'll have some big decisions to make in terms of strategic goals for the next year, and future event planning and so on and so forth. So we won't slow down at all once SPJ 2020, the virtual conference occurs. So with that, I'll leave the rest of it to what I wrote in the report, and any questions, I'm glad to answer. Oh, one more thing. Most important thing, sorry, I had written down. We do have a new director of education. As I mentioned, our staff, and we have grown into that position. And I would like Kirin Smith, our new director of education, to introduce herself, tell us a little bit about her. We've spent a lot of board meetings talking about this role, and here she is. So I'd like her to introduce herself to you.
Hey, thanks, John. Hi, everyone. I'm Kirin Nishimura Smith, and I thought it was funny that John said he's only met a small handful of you face to face, and beyond John, I've only met one other staff member face to face. So I know that they're real and they're awesome, and I'm really happy to be joining the staff. My background is actually in higher education and association management. So I worked at 2 different universities, Western Illinois University as a grad student, and then Wichita State University in Kansas for 4 years, working with undergraduate chapters of all sorts of different organizations. After that, I moved blindly to Indianapolis. I worked for 2 different associations as a director of student services, member services, and education. That whole family or that suite of experiences. And then after that, I've been doing consulting work for associations, universities, and fraternal organizations. So in this role, I'm in my happy place. I'm really excited to follow along with the strategic plan, develop a really great operational plan around leadership and education to strengthen and transform an organization. So I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks very much, Kirin, and welcome aboard. John, anything else for your report?
Nope, that is all.
Super. We're on to number 6 on the agenda then, and this is a membership report that Carolyn Escobar put together for us. So thanks very much, Carolyn, for taking the time to give us a snapshot of where we are in terms of members. This is a priority that will get attention in the coming year, I know, assuming we move forward as planned. But the memo includes number 6A, which is asking for some action. So in all, Carolyn's memo outlines 20 chapters that are, she is recommending that we deactivate. I guess I would ask, I do see your hand, Lauren, before we go to, do you have a process question, Lauren, before we move?
I actually want to make a motion.
That'd be fine, go ahead.
Is that okay?
Yes, please go ahead.
Okay, I move that we deactivate the chapters on the list provided by Caroline, except for IUPUI, Baylor University, and Minnesota State Moorhead. And I'll explain why once we have a second.
Very good. Do we have a second on the motion?
Second, Riley.
Thank you, Mike Riley, second. All right, let's go to questions and comments and start with Lauren explaining your desire for those 3 exceptions to begin with, please.
So when we got the report from Caroline, I sent it to the regional coordinators to ask them if there were any chapters that they thought could be saved or they might be in contact with. And for IUPUI, a student recently contacted regional coordinator Amy Merrick about restarting the chapter, and Amy wants to start with a student. For Baylor, regional coordinator Catherine Jones said Baylor had a big showing at the Region 8 MOE Awards in the spring, and they regularly attend the regional conference, so she wants to connect with their advisor and see if she can revive that chapter. And for Minnesota State Moorhead, I heard from regional coordinator Joe Radsky, and he told me they were on the verge of getting back on their feet when COVID-19 hit. And then he is now on faculty there, so he is working with them and expects and hopes they will be back in spring semester.
Matt Hall, I saw your hand next.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, before we get too far down this path, Caroline, if you could tell us what efforts were made to make sure that these, all these schools were active. And then secondarily, if we do deactivate these schools, what is the procedure that each would have to go through to reactivate? I know we spent a lot of time in the strategic task force talking about outreach to campus chapters we're actually looking to start 10 new chapters. It's always easier to start chapters where there has been a previous presence. And if there's not a lot of heavy lifting to do, it might be easier to keep them in abeyance before we actually deactivate them. So those are my 2 questions. Thank you very much.
Sure. Thanks, Matt. Can everybody hear me okay? Okay. So as Lauren mentioned, she did take initiative to reach out to regional coordinators with the list of chapters that I have recommended to go ahead and deactivate. On the list, you will see the last time we received an annual report, which is what AR stands for. So from there, it's really, as far as outreach, it just becomes kind of a University of Google situation. I just get on their websites and figure out if I can determine who is the current advisor. I do member searches in our database to determine if there are any active students, and then I will reach out to them. So it's sort of just kind of I just kind of go and investigate wherever I can. The only one that I had heard from was IUPUI in regards to Amy Merrick, but I did not have confirmation on that. So thank you, Lauren, for that one. Otherwise, there was just no response. So if we don't get a response, then they remained on the list. Lauren. I'm sorry, I think there was one more question, Matt. The process for reactivating. So I like to follow along with the requirements, but I do like to make them as easy as possible. So one of the first things that I do is I waive the application fee because they've already paid that once. And it's hard enough for especially our campus chapters as it is. So I waive that application fee. And then I just require a few simple steps, a list of 10 members that are members of SPJ and willing to serve as members of the student chapter. I ask that they hold an election to find 4 officers, 3 to 4 officers. I don't require a treasurer if there's not going to be any kind of financial component to their chapter. Then I ask them to update bylaws and get me a copy of those bylaws, and then basically just what is your plan of action? A simple, what are you going to do in the first 3 to 5 months? And then what can I do? What do you need from me? Is it membership materials? Do you need me to send you code of ethics, brochures, anything I can do from a headquarters standpoint to help them get back up on their feet. And so that's really it as far as reactivating. I try to make it as simple as possible for them because I would rather have them reactivate and get going versus getting lost in the weeds of a bunch of irrelevant work, in my opinion. Lauren.
So I might want to amend my own motion regarding one chapter, which is the University of Missouri. I know it's one of the largest journalism schools, and that I think it's on the list of the 10 that the people on the membership committee were interested in getting going. They're the ones that had a couple of them had the idea about the 10 chapters. And I know that their RC has not been very active this year. So can I make a friendly amendment to my own motion, Patty, to put University of Missouri on that list? And I'm sure that we have alums or other active SPJers that can help find contacts there. That it would be great if that could be the first chapter of the 10 that we go after.
Absolutely.
All right, do we have other questions or comments related to the full list or related to Lauren's proposal as amended?
Yeah, whoever seconded it, will you accept my friendly amendment to my own motion?
So moved.
Thank you.
Riley.
Thank you.
I did that for you, Andy.
All right, so that would mean if we extract those 4, there would be 16 chapters that we would deactivate for the reasons that Caroline has outlined. Are we ready to vote on this? All right, all those in favor of the motion on the floor as articulated, please say aye.
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 Any objections? Any abstentions? The motion carries and we will go forward. We will have more to say on the health of chapters and the strategy of getting more chapters as we go through the meeting. And so let's reserve some time for that. All right, moving on. Yes, John.
Sorry to interrupt. Do we want a separate motion to accept the University of New Hampshire as a new chapter as part of that report as well?
Yes, I'm sorry. Let's return to that. Can I have a motion to accept? I saw Lauren's hand first. Is
moved.
that a second?
Can I
Second from Matt
actually
Hall?
friendly request as a UNH alum? Go Wildcats. University of New Hampshire we're talking about? Can I make that motion? You can second it, Lauren?
Sure.
You're awesome.
Okay, very good. Matt Hall has made the motion. Let the record show. And Lauren Bartlett is our second on that one to activate the new chapter there. And I think as president, Matt, you're going to have to make a trip to the East to welcome the new student chapter.
In the spring, not the winter.
In the spring, sometime when we can all travel again. All right. Thank you, John, for that. And moving forward, then we're on to the next, which is the.
And do a quick
let's
vote
vote,
on that.
Patty.
You have to vote.
I'm sorry. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? The motion carries. We now have those two motions behind us, and we're moving on to agenda item number 7. I was so eager to get to agenda item number 7, SPJ 2020, that I jumped the gun. And so here, I hope everyone is aware we're having a conference next weekend. There's a website you can go to and you can sign up for said conference. We've been getting regular updates from John, of course, that we had, as of yesterday, 451, right? 451 registrations. It might have moved overnight, which would be good. So at this point, I would just ask all board members and everybody on this call to, of course, register and, of course, promote the conference with your circles, right? Your colleagues, your friends, your family, whoever you can get to sign up. It's really a remarkable lineup. We have a very, very strong agenda. I'm super excited that we have the fellows, that we're highlighting the fellows this year. I think that has worked out really well. In most years, it's hard to give them that kind of prominence for a bunch of reasons, but I think we hit on the right recipe there. We have 3 super sessions that are very well populated. We've got a few outstanding guests that might be added to the lineup, but what you're seeing online is pretty much it. And then we have another 20 workshops and breakout sessions, plus some entertainment and some special opportunities with films and speeches and awards and, voting and the business session. So it's got a lot of moving parts, but it's a well-scripted event at this point. And we've had just a lot of discussion about it. And of course, the staff has been working nonstop to put all the pieces together. So with that, would take questions and comments. I saw Andy shots his hand first and then Matt Hall.
I just had a quick question about the registration process. I saw some people in the room have paid for students to attend. I just want to know what the process is, because it's not clear to me when you go to the form to sign up, you can only do it once and you have to know who the person is. How do you get around that?
Yeah, so we, if you know the person so that what you just described, if you know the student you want to sponsor, obviously the website's set up to do that and do that very easily. If you want to sponsor a multiple, it's like Matt Hall did and Rebecca Aguilar did and Patty had, like others have, what you should do is reach out to us. You can reach out to me and share that. What will help us is if you can help get the names. So we don't have a holding pen necessarily of people who want a scholarship right now. So if you have a group of students you want us to sponsor, 5 students, send us those 5 names. We will send them a comp code and then you will pay for them at some point and then they're in. So
Okay.
That's the way it would be easiest to make it work.
Thank you.
Super, Matt Hall.
Yeah, I was just, Andy raised the point that I was gonna raise. It was super easy for me. I just on Twitter said I just signed up for the convention, the conference, and I'm going to sponsor 10 students. And within 48 hours, 10 students had DM'd me, and I just sent the email and the name to John, and then I'll send a check to HQ next week, or you can give them your credit card too. Super easy, and it was super awesome. It felt really good to sponsor any students, let alone that many. I mean, I would urge you to the extent that you can and are able to give, to do so. It's a big way to get student journalists into the organization, which is what we're all focused on. And my 10, it was mostly women mostly journalists of color, and they were from all over the country. Although I think half of them were from San Diego because they followed me on Twitter and were quick to jump in. But I would urge you, to the extent that you can, even if it's one student, to do that, because you can make an impact on that person's life.
One other idea is to ask them to be members. Say that you'll pay the $25, so they have to sign up for the $37.50, and then give you their membership number. That's a couple more steps. Might not work for everybody, but that's what I'm doing at my school. All right. Any other comments?
If I could say a couple of things real quick while we're on that. Hazel Becker, I think, is on the call. Freelance Community is sponsoring, via her, several people to attend. So thank you, Hazel. And Sue Kopen-Katzef has paid for a couple of our new UNH students to attend. So thank you, Sue.
Yeah, that's great advocacy as board members, and really appreciate all that. Any other comments or questions on the conference? All right. Well, we'll see everybody next Saturday for that. Moving on to next, and that is the topic of voting for candidates at SPJ 2020. And we just want to review how that's going to happen to make sure that everybody's up to speed on the business side of SPJ. So probably not best for me. John, can I put you back on to explain the voting process?
Yeah, I don't have notes in front of me, so this is a good exercise. Elections, we are doing elections electronically again this year, where one member, one vote, via simplyvoting.com, the website. And what we're going to do is on Tuesday, we will, the candidates have been asked to prepare their speeches in advance and record 3-minute speeches. Those will be uploaded and shared on Tuesday through the Election Central website. During this coming week, we will upload our member database into the system so that members will receive a login credential to actually participate in the voting. We actually had a campaign these last couple of weeks to try to get members to make sure their email address is correct, because that seemed to be one of the issues we faced last year. But we'll be prepared to answer those inquiries as well as they come about. Voting will officially open up noon on Friday, and then we'll close noon on Sunday to allow for that 48-hour window, and it gives us a few hours to assess the results, notify the winners, and then announce the results at the closing ceremony of SPJ 2020. So that is how the process for elections is going, and maybe we stop and answer questions to that first before we go to the business session.
I'll just say also, all candidates would be alerted in that window,
Yes.
not just the winning candidates. I'm going to go to Lauren first, and then Matt. Lauren.
John, will you be overseeing the staff that will be handling the election and the voting?
Yes, yep. Caroline and Matt Kent and myself are sort of the three that are going to be directly hands-on through the whole process.
Excellent. Matt Hall.
I have a motion I'd like to make, just so we're clear on the bylaws and the unusual nature of this election, because we're doing it remotely and rather than in person. So I'm gonna, you tell me, Patty, if you want me to read this now or you want to have more discussion, but I'm gonna put my motion in the chat.
We can continue after the motion is there, but Matt is making a motion. We're going to see it here. Sure, there it is. That this is to accommodate, this is to ensure that this is to acknowledge that our bylaws call for a different process for voting, right?
Yeah, this
but
covers us. Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I'll just say this covers us because the bylaws have a different, have some language that we need to be mindful of. This election, as I said, it's an unusual election because we're doing it virtually because of the pandemic. So to make sure that the elections are by the book, we ran this by Bob Becker, our bylaws committee chair, also on the bylaws committee. And we want to just make sure we're doing this above board and by the book. So I'm happy to read this as well, but I think everyone can see it in the chat. It's 3 or 4 short paragraphs that give us the ability to do what we're going to do.
Very good. So that's a motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Lauren. Any further discussion on this particular aspect of the voting? Bob Becker, are we good?
I think that's fine. It's just the time. The timing is the only issue. We only have one business meeting, and in fact, the voting is going to straddle that meeting, starting before it and ending after it. It's the best we can do under the circumstances.
Thank you very much. Are we ready to vote on this motion? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections? Any abstentions? All right, unanimous. Additionally, I think we should just review briefly the business function, meaning the resolutions, the things that typically happen during a business meeting. We've had some practice, and we've had a meeting with all of the delegates. And again, we feel as though we have considered, the staff has done all the heavy work here, considered all the ins and outs to make this run smoothly in terms of collecting votes. We have 75 delegates who have a combination of 95 votes. And we have how many resolutions at this hour? Let's see, maybe we should ask Mike Savino to just talk briefly. Would that be all right? And then we'll call on Caroline. Michael Savino, are you ready to just briefly give us an overview on how this is all working?
Yeah, I can hop in now. So we have 13 resolutions as of right now, which is the same number that we had last year. The big issue, the only one that right now seems like it could be controversial is the sponsorship policy that came out of the task force, and there's some debate even over how to get that to the floor. Bob Becker has suggested that come by moving the task force's report, which would obviously then render the resolution itself moot. But otherwise, the resolutions are they appear to be pretty non-controversial right now. There's a couple honoring one Jim Lair and another one for Ginny Frizzy, a former regional director. Then there's a whole block from the International Committee responding to what's going on in several spots of the treatment of journalists. There's one from Catherine Fox dealing with an issue of censoring scientists within several agencies, an issue that she's been talking about. And then there's the standard thank yous that we get every year. So I'm guessing a lot of those will get moved as a consensus block, but not as much controversy as we normally see.
And Caroline, I'll go to you in just a second. I have had a couple of requests, Michael, for resolutions to be read in full, but we can deal with that offline later. Caroline,
Yeah,
had a comment?
I've had that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Patty. I just quickly wanted to update. The number of delegates and votes did change slightly. There were 2 chapters that had some technical issues and did not realize that their forms did not go through. So internally, John and I made the executive decision to go ahead and approve them. So there are actually a total of 106 votes with 83 total delegates. That includes our regional delegates. Thanks.
And we have how many regional delegates? Just 4?
5. There are 5
5.
regions are represented, 1, 2, 8, 10, and 11.
All right, so it seems as though we have worked out the logistics of collecting votes and bringing the resolutions to the floor. Matt Hall, question or comment?
Yeah, both. A quick question for Caroline first. Which chapters were added?
That would be Chicago Headline Club and San Diego Pro.
Okay, good. I had a question about San Diego, so I'm glad to hear that it's resolved. Thank you very much for
Yeah,
that.
absolutely.
And then my quick comment is, and maybe this is not the place for it, but because we're talking about the business meeting, because this is a virtual convention we're all going to in a couple of weeks or in a week. I just want to make sure for those who haven't heard, I ran this by some of the board members who are going to still be on the board, but because there's some candidates on the call, it's looking like September 26th will be the first board meeting for my presidency. And as you recall, long-timers, that's when new and old members, board members alike, get their training on duty of care, etc., from the attorney. So it's a pretty important part of the meeting. And then there'll be some other stuff, some fun stuff that we do as well. So September 26th, 9 a.m. PDT. And just for those who don't know, I am on the West Coast, so all the times will be PDT this year.
Thank you, Matt.
Representing his people, his West Coast people.
as
I
long as
know.
he doesn't
ESP.
As long as he doesn't set them for 9 o'clock PDT in the evening.
That's right. Oh, I'm feeling that pain having done the 11 o'clock or the midnight Jim Bohannon show last night. All right, moving on to, let's see, we don't have anything lingering. We have covered, are there additional questions? I see Andy Schott's hand up.
I just wanted to ask a quick question of Caroline, because this is a process that is only a few years old, the regional delegate for unaffiliated members process. Thanks for explaining which ones. I do notice that there is only one delegate for each of those. And could you just explain, did we only have one person come forward for those 5 regions? And did the other regions not have anyone come forward?
Yes, so thanks, Andy. Great question. So yes, there was only one person for each of these 5 regions who requested to be the regional delegate. We did end up extending that deadline per request of Alex Turquinio to see if we could gather any more interest from the other regions, and there were none. And there was only one region, I believe it was Region 1, that did have a second request, but it turns out they are a member of the Long Island Press Club, proudly, and they did not realize that they could not do both. So they respectfully bowed out, and so there were no other issues other than that.
Thank you.
Yep.
As a follow-up to that, the goal, I assume, is to make sure that we have regional representation for all 12 regions. And I just wonder if that's something that I let slip. I'm not sure whose task that really would have been. So just kind of as a point of information, is that who should be soliciting regional representation?
Patty, if I could
Yeah,
give
go
a
ahead.
little bit of background on this, because I was on the task force. There was a decision a number of years ago that there was a desire to find a way for representation in governance for the unaffiliated members in the regions. And this is the result of that. And I think that it's headquarters regularly reaches out and includes information and leads. And so I think it goes with that regular kind of promotion. Since this started, it's been frequently out there, but there has not been a large amount of interest.
I'm just wondering whether that work should be assigned to a committee to be more proactive about it. Maybe the resolutions committee, maybe the nominations committee, I'm not sure. And that's something that, Matt, you can just think about whether there needs to be more specific intentional recruiting for that.
The regional coordinators might be able to do that when they reach out, when they're regular communications with their regions. They're probably the closest to it.
Matt Hall.
Yeah, I do think this is an important issue because obviously unaffiliated members get a number of votes. And I'm seeing in the chat field that Jennifer and Amy weren't aware of the process or weren't contacted. And Colin actually has an intriguing idea, which is that RCs themselves might be able to be the delegates. That way you're in shared representation. I don't know, something to think about. But my question is, if you're an unaffiliated member in a region, I would urge you to reach out to the delegate so chosen. And my question is, if that delegate has multiple votes, can they split them, or are they required to use all of them in one direction or another?
May I speak briefly?
Go ahead, Bob.
Any delegate who has more than one vote can split their votes according to the rules of the convention. So they can vote some for yes and some for no.
Thank you.
All right, any additional questions on the voting process? And we'll just cross our fingers that all goes smoothly. And thank Mike Savino for getting us through that. thanking you in advance, Mike Savino.
Yeah, let's wait. Let's
With
see how it goes
confidence,
first.
that confidence that is.
I'm glad one of us is.
All right, super, thank you. And we're moving on now to number 9 on our agenda, and that is future conference options. This
Patty,
is
if
the
I
topic
could, I'd like to
that's-
make a motion to move that lower on the agenda to item number 15. That way we can do the discussion, public comment, and then go right into exec session on it. Might speed things along a little bit. If I can get a second, that's great. If not, we can leave it where it is.
All right, Yvette Walker, or is that a second? All right, we do have a second, and so we have a motion on the floor to move that down to right before public comment. Any discussion or questions? Lauren Bartlett.
I think we might have some members who joined us for the purpose of the discussion of this item and may not want to be here the entire time of the meeting because we have a lengthy agenda. So that would be the concern I would have about moving it.
Could I have members who have joined us just for this agenda item put their preferences in the chat field, please?
I think we could get through most of those things pretty quickly. So. The remaining things before 15.
Right. So chapter, okay. Not getting any reaction here. So let's move to a vote board. I'd like to stay where it is. Mark Scrapp would like it to stay where it is, and he had some strong thoughts. Randy Shostak, what's your preference?
I'd prefer to have it soon if possible, but I'll go with whatever the board wants.
Yeah, I think we could get slowed down a bit by the badge proposal, Mike. So anyway, we have a motion on the floor to move the item. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Do I have some opposition?
No.
No.
I'll say no, just because people are here for this.
That's 3. That's 4 from Taylor. All right, it looks as though there's a preference to stay. Thank you, Mike, for the idea, but the motion is does not pass. And let's then move to the memo from John about future conference options. I think everybody had a chance to read it, that staff is proposing that we go to Washington, D.C. for the next 3 consecutive years after New Orleans for the reasons outlined: efficiency, costs, negotiating power, and so on and so forth. So I can take a motion, or we can discuss whatever the preference of the board is.
I do have some other background material I'd like to share at some point as well.
I think that would be appropriate now, John. Thanks.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can you see 3 points on a slide?
Join the meeting.
All right, just want to make sure I got it up here right. So this is what's in the memo. 3 things we're recommending. You know, this time of year, we always do make sure we look ahead to future conventions. In fact, we might be a little behind, but I think that's okay. We want to make a smart decision here. But right now, we're only under contract for 2021 in New Orleans. And so this is looking ahead beyond that. We have some recommendations as a staff after some conversation and some discussion. 1, that it be moved to later than early September. As 2, that we try to lump 3 years, 2 to 3 years in the same place in order to get some bargaining power and to build consistency. And 3, that that place ideally would be Washington, D.C. So the memo lays out some of those reasons why, which I just want to add a few more points to that. So if I can get there we go. So this chart was in the packet that I shared with you, just as a sense for all to understand sort of how our membership is distributed by time zone. And so just get a sense of that. And I'm excited we have a president in the Pacific time zone next year. So that certainly is going to be a different thing for many of us, which is great. And I just want to share too, that as executive director, I'm not looking for an East Coast bias here with this decision. I'm really looking what I think is best for the organization in general. But as a business decision, which is part of my responsibility as executive director, I have to look at charts like this, and it has to enter my thinking around the fact that over 70% of our membership is in the Central or Eastern time zone. So just something to consider. Why do we have annual meetings and conventions? Something that we all have to think about. And I'll just give you my standpoint and my viewpoint on that, and why this is even coming up as a suggestion. Obviously, there's an opportunity to network, an opportunity to educate, an opportunity to conduct business. And to me, it's an opportunity to make a statement, to say that, you know, this is something that we're doing to advance our strategic plan and our mission. And is it an opportunity to grow? I saw some comments come through, and so I'm sure there's some comments that may be discussed around, you know, why would we want to only be in one part of the country? You know, why wouldn't we want to ignore the opportunity to grow or expand the membership to other parts of the country? The data tells us that it doesn't matter. Our total membership has been declining. This is the chart I shared with the board early in the year. It's been declining no matter where we put this thing. Whether we go, and if you look here, you know, we could talk about each one, but the main point that I'm taking away from this chart is convention is not equal membership growth, nor really should. It is not a driver of membership growth. We have to come up with other ways to drive membership growth. Convention or conference is an opportunity to carry out the mission of the organization, but it in itself is not a driver of growth. And frankly, for most organizations, it's not. Some who have it as their mission to train and educate, it is. And that's their sole mission, or their reason for being, or their purpose for being. So I just want to point that out there as a data point I was looking at when I was trying to think through this decision. Unfortunately, our data on attendance is not the best because we've had partners for a long time, and some of the data I find does not separate out how we relate to how many RTDNA members or NAHJ members attended our various events. So the best I can do is the last 3 years is generally our SPJ members attendance has been these points. So in Anaheim, 487, in Baltimore, 488, and San Antonio, 414. I don't think we pay attention to the variances other to say than traditionally it looks like we get 400 to 500 of our members to attend this annual meeting, whatever that may be. So right now that's, you know, less than 1/10 of our membership attend our annual meeting. So from a business standpoint, from a wanting this organization to succeed standpoint, I want that to grow. I want 1,000 of our members at an event by the time we get to 2023, 2024, and beyond. I don't want to be comfortable with just 400 members and pick locations that will keep us just getting 400 to 500 members. And I really think if we hone in as a business plan on a location for a short amount of time, for a few years, and really get focused and really spend our energy on trying to sell the experience and build up attendance and build up membership at the same time, then in 5 years, 6 years, 7 years, I'd love for us to take this event to all sorts of places once we've rebuilt our muscle, rebuilt our strength around hosting an event. I can't honestly say I believe that if we travel to, you know, continue to rotate it around the country, we aren't just going to keep getting the same results. Because that, you know, we haven't taken a lot of risk with this event, and you've seen what the attendance and the membership really has looked like without taking a lot of risks with the event. I shared this chart as well for whatever interest you may have in it. To me, it basically showed that Washington, D.C. is a good location in that it's 6 hours drive for almost a quarter of our membership. And really as a way to look at it too, I understand the time zone differential. I understand that West Coasters traveling to the East Coast may have to come in a day early. I understand that there are cost impacts as well. But simply by sheer fact of it, an organization like ours probably cannot be in the hubs, LA, San Francisco, because they're too expensive for our size of organization and our current size of event. Like I said, I want to get there someday. So we're going to be in places like Reno, Las Vegas, maybe Sacramento, places like that, where the bulk of our members on the West Coast still have to get on a plane and get there. So something to keep in mind is that we think in our minds that if we travel the event to and place it in a region, that we're just all of a sudden closer to that region. people that live in the West know it's a vast region. So you could place it somewhere out there and still be quite a ways from your membership. So I just want to, that's also in my calculus. That's also in my thinking.
And I'm sorry, I can't see the slides that you're referring to. Is still on the first with the 3 bullet points.
Oh, it isn't? Are the slides not advancing?
No,
Correct.
not that I can see.
Right. We just have the first slide, John, that ends with the 1, 2, 3.
Well,
I'll try again.
Now that I know that information.
Sorry, I was putting it in chat, but of course you were occupied.
All right.
There we go. So you want to go back to number 2 and just take a quick trip through those?
Okay.
Yep, there we go.
So this was the chart I was referring to with our membership. So again, this is not a very pleasant chart to look at with our membership, but again, the point I'm drawing from this chart is that where we place our convention does not equal a growth or an impact on membership. And it's not really what events are essentially designed to do. So as the membership argument is concerned, I don't feel like it's traveling around the country isn't going to necessarily boost our membership as far as that is concerned. Our attendance at conventions, as I shared, was right around 400 to 500 members. So that is, again, what as I said before, is sort of our, what seems to have been our sweet spot for attendance of our members at our events. So this doesn't account our partners, exhibitors, presenters, just our members attending the event. This again was the heat chart that sort of says where our membership currently is located. And I was referring to it being obviously DC being placed in a centralized location to a lot of drivability for our members, as well as some of the hot spots of where our current membership is located. So financially, that looks like a fairly good decision. If we were building a franchise or building a set of businesses, we'd want to put them where the most of our members can reach them easily. I don't want to ignore members in other geographic areas, of course. So here's some other considerations. What if we, at the same time, were to boost and amplify the role of regional conferences, especially in the Pacific and Mountain time zones? That those events become that touch point for many of our members out there, as well as in all of our regions. And what can we do to improve those events to increase attendance? What if we did move the SDX Awards? That's an event that's more easily movable. As far as a financial standpoint goes, you just need a ballroom for a night. And those can be moved to, maybe we would move that to Los Angeles. We've always wanted to improve the awards feel and vibe of that event. And then we could pair it with a symposium as well to kind of create and increase the sense of what that event could be. And this is dreaming and brainstorming, but showing that even if we decide to put the convention in DC, it's not that we can't do events or things in other parts of the country. Consider a pricing model that makes it more fair for those traveling great distances. That would be something we should think about, could be innovative. How do we understand and recognize that there's some of that travel differential and show appreciation through some pricing models? And if we do a good job of learning how to conduct our business virtually, we have the one member, one vote on elections. Would we want to continue to have business conducted that way so we can get more voices in our business matters? And so then if we were to do that, then the consideration of being accessible for this event to members may not be as essential, simply because you could still conduct the business for most people and in most places. Somebody asked about multi-year events, and I'll just say there are lots of savings you can have from those. My favorite is that you lock in rates. So you can go to a hotel, and if they say, okay, this year we'll give you $159, next year $169, the year after that $179, we could come back and say, no, we want $159 all years. We want $25,000 F&B minimum all 3 years. And that way we can for all 3 years to be consistent. There also is rebates. They give you discounts on some of the most expensive things that these conventions have, including AV and internet access. There's fewer site visits, so that draws the expense down on the overall bottom line. So, and then we can also strike similar deals with offsite venues we would use for added events. So one property in DC, for instance, is within walking distance of the National Press Club, and maybe we hold an offsite event there. And if we build that on a 3-year contractual basis, then that also can give us discounts. So to me, there's a lot to work with. True, you can get discounts to a degree as well if you have a property and go to 3 different places. So if we say we're going to do Hilton here, here, and here, we can work in some deals like that too. So I would love to look at that. If we decide that we still want to rotate the event, I would still look at to do a multi-year deal with a chain so that we get some benefit from that. All right. Sorry, and I'll answer questions because I know you didn't see some of those slides very long, but I think it's a bold and innovative approach to me what this event can be, and it makes a statement. It says that the longest serving journalism organization and the most well-known journalism organization in the world is going to go to our nation's capital for 3 years, and we're going to fight for journalism. And I just really feel like we can make a statement with this event and really drive our strategies forward if we are thoughtful about how we do it.
All right, there's a lot of chatter in chat field. First of all, thank you, John, for the additional explanation of the thinking here. Let's have some comments from board members first, please. Lauren Bartlett.
I really do appreciate John's innovative thinking, and I appreciate that you're willing to push us and make us think. I would like more information before the board makes a decision, because I would like to know what the cost savings would be going with one chain in multi-cities. So I don't know if a motion is needed to not make a decision today. I have a lot of concerns about it being in DC and for 3 years, and John, you articulated many of them for me. And Mark Scarp articulated the rest of them in his letter. I strongly believe we need to have a good and strong lobbying presence in Washington, DC. During the convention is not the time that staff or officers and other board members have time to do that. And I really do think that should be at a different point in time during the year, even though, and it is very important that we do that. I am concerned about the extra cost and extra day off work that people in the West need to take whenever the conference is East. And because of the way our membership is based, it has been out in the West once every 5 or 6 years. And so I am not looking for equality 1 year West Coast, 1 year East Coast, or 2 years East Coast, 2 years West Coast. But I think it's also about accessibility for members. So I would like more information before the board makes any decision. I would like to know, I know that there's some information available in executive session for some of the chains for DC only, but I think the board might want to discuss some different dates. But I would like to be able to compare that to a multi-city approach. And at this point in time, I still favor the multi-city approach.
Yvette Walker.
I think we're looking at several points here. I think we're looking at it from a financial point of view. I think we're looking at it from what membership is used to. And I think we're looking at it from this idea of a statement that it could make. I think all of them are valid, but I think that it takes us to different conversations, to different points of view. So I think that journalists are not used to the looking at a similar city or same city for 2 or 3 years. We're used to, in fact, just about all the organizations I can think of, not including NAB, but NAB is not necessarily a journalism organization. We're used to it moving around, and those cities typically have appealed to us for, travel points of view, for taking our families and things like that. But so we're not used to that. The idea of it being in DC as a financial one, I agree with Lauren. It would be nice to see if we look at the chain, asking chains for a price and see if that basically equates the savings that we would have in Washington. However, the statement, just to me, the statement makes me really, really find this appealing. But we would have to decide, is that why we're doing this? So if we decide that we are going to stay in Washington, DC for 2 or 3 years, I know that Mike and some people in the chat are talking about 2 instead of 3, then we have to make sure that's part of our strategic plan, that we are that we are going to fight for journalism. I mean, I know we are, but that we are going to use this as a statement, but also as an opportunity to be in DC more, and to really try to take conversations with people there that we need to do the work that we have to do, and make it around this statement. I think that DC as a travel destination, yeah, that's not a problem. I think that's not a problem the way we would have a problem maybe with Indy. But then also, we don't know what travel is going to look like. I mean, I certainly hope that we get our shots soon so we can start traveling again and we don't have to worry about the pandemic, but we don't know. So I think there's just a couple things to think about there. Some people in the chat have been talking about making part of it virtual. And if we're not concerned about losing membership, not membership, but losing attendance, if we take part of it virtual, then that's also a very interesting idea. So I just think that there's several things to think about, and I think we have to decide what one or two is more important than the others. Because I think that this bold idea, and I think this organization, we're at a time where we need to be comfortable with risk. Totally agree with that. But I think we have to decide what's more important for us now, taking us into the future, and if there is one or two aspects of it that people are uncomfortable with, are those other aspects more important? I think we have to have those discussions.
Other comments and questions, board members? Matt Hall. And then Taylor.
I want to say at the outset, thank you for the innovative look at this. I've been taking part in these discussions for a long time, and they always break down to, but San Diego's nice. And so I think that there's a real value to looking at this, both in terms of making a statement and, as Yvette just said, some cost savings. So I do think it's a difficult decision, and I'm fine with holding off if we don't wait too long. So I guess some questions to help drive this discussion for us. When do we need to make a decision? Obviously, what Yvette said is totally true. We don't even know if people are going to be flying. No, we have no idea if there's going to be a treatment or a vaccine. So that super complicates things. But I guess in a general sense, when will we have to make a decision? That'll be important so we know our drop dead date. And then I also think there's some intriguing conversation on email and in the chat today about 2 of 3 or 3 of 6. Like, do we know what the cost savings are if we broke it down like that? So it wasn't 3 sequential dates. And then also the chain, maybe whether that's moving it around. I think there's a value to doing it in DC for multiple years. I think John made a very strong case that, it doesn't matter where we go, that you got to get on a plane and you want to have the end result, getting off the plane, simple and easy with a lot to do. And the fact that 9 and 10 of our members don't come to the convention, like, we should be thinking about them. Like, this isn't working. 9 and 10 people aren't coming. So we need to do something that would incentivize 9 or 10 people to go. And if so many aren't coming each year, that means that there's a big group of people who might come to DC one year, but then more of those people might come the second year. So it's even bisecting the audience, if I explain that very well. And I think with our advocacy and with the elections coming up and with the fact that we should go back to DC, in my opinion, because we didn't get to go this year, going in a midterm election in 22 and going in a presidential election in 24, which is going to be bonkers, would be great. And if we're going to make a big push with advocacy, which I think that we should, and if we're looking at having a staffer in DC, there's a lot of synergies that we could have with a setting there. But I also think rather than us making a decision now, one of the pieces of information we don't have is what our membership does want. And I know we've surveyed our membership a lot, but an email survey, would you go to DC for 3 straight years? Would be smart. And then we can use that data. And if membership comes back and says, hell yeah, then it makes a decision even easier, in my opinion. I'm already leaning towards thinking this is a brilliant idea and a risk, but a strategic and smart risk. And so again, thanks to John, thanks everyone for weighing in, both on the board and not. I know this triggered a lot of conversation, and so it's been good to see.
Thank you, Matt. Before we go forward with other comments or questions, John, would you answer the question about when you feel like we must make decisions on at least 2022?
There's, there's no exact formula, especially now because of the way COVID has shaken everything up. I think it would be smart for us to make a decision between now and the end of the year in December, simply because then that gives us an opportunity to really give a full year of knowing where we're going to go in 2022. So, and we may want to think even 2023 at the same time, that kind of stuff.
I would also ask the question about partnerships. Right now, next year, we are so low. Obviously, if we make decisions and lock in places and times without a partner, then we're inviting somebody else to follow our lead. So what's your thinking on how we make that work? Are you open? Are you interested in us having partners for conferences going forward? Or do we return to an SPJ only model?
I mean, my opinion is that eventually we should get to being sort of the journalism conference to end all conferences, so to speak. Get as many partners as we can to all come together and have that presence and that energy at least every so often. And I really feel like we could, if we're in one place and we know we're going to be there, in a place like DC where so many of these organizations are already headquartered, it makes it easier for us to say, hey, we're going to be in DC. Would you want your event to be there? Versus saying, we're going to be in St. Louis in 2014 or 2024, for instance. And would you mind having your event in St. Louis with us? I mean, it's an easier sell in my mind, but that's all theoretical. I would like to have partners, yes.
Thanks. Very good. Other questions? Let's go to Yvette Davila Richards, and then, I'm sorry, Taylor had her hand up first. Let's go to Taylor, then Yvette, then back to Lauren. And I think it would be, if board, if you're comfortable having other folks who are non-board members weigh in now rather than circling back, seems like a more efficient way to handle it. So Taylor first.
I agree with what others have said about wanting to see the financial comparison with going with a chain versus going from DC all 3 years. There are things that John said that actually really piqued my interest. But like Yvette pointed out, we have to decide, is this more a financial decision? Is this more, we want to, I mean, there's so many different layers here if we go one direction or the other. Somebody in the chat mentioned, is it possible to bring this up in a business session so more of our members know about this? And I think a survey would be good, but I'm wondering if that's an option for us to make sure that everyone is aware.
Okay, very good. Let's go to Yvette next. Unmute.
Okay, now.
We can hear you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Great afternoon to you all. John, you pointed out some great points. I love DC, love going there, but we do need to look at our finances to make sure that this is viable. But that being said, because of COVID, we also really need to take a strong look at having this virtual. The last conference that just happened with NHJ and NDJ was super successful, and they had theirs virtually, and they had over 3,000 attendees. Within membership, you had recruiters. I participated, and I had one day, because I'm always job hunting just to see what the next best thing could be that would benefit me. And in one day, I had 8 interviews, which were nicely set up on the chat. We had 10-15-minute discussions that followed through. I think even though a lot of people say DC on the East Coast is super expensive, but it's also a viable city for us. So I'm an East Coast lover, therefore also because I live on the East Coast, but it is a viable city for other organizations to see if we were planted there for the next 3 years. I'm in agreement with you. it will be viable for us to also partner with other organizations because it will make us more strong. I think we do want to become the organization that is a per se that everyone wants to be a part of, which I definitely advocate for all the time. I'm always promoting this organization on Twitter and on social media. But it is also critical for us to sponsor with other like-minded organizations because it will make our membership grow. We'll get other people that will join us, and financially it will be to the better of us. So I agree with the viewpoints said by you, by John, that we need to just allocate and detail business-wise how is this going to benefit us, because right now people's finances are up in arms. You know, not everyone is fully working full-time. People working freelance. I'm a freelance journalist at the moment, so I know finances is a big issue. But at the end of the day, virtual needs to be really, really looked into because it's become what it is now. And so I still think financially we will be okay if we promote it enough, if we take the time to make sure the workshops are done right. I think we will still be, one, very popular with our membership, and two, we will get sponsors that can come on board, other like-minded organizations that can help us out. So that was my take on it.
Thanks very much, Yvette. We'll go to Lauren next, and I wonder if we could ask Randy after that, as the president of our DC chapter, to give his input. Go ahead, Lauren.
Sure. And I definitely want to hear input from others, but I was sort of going toward a conclusion in terms of next steps. And I think if we have a consensus of the board that this is not something we would need to vote on, which is to do a member survey. That is a great idea, Matt, to get information from chains on multi-locations, and then to get the information from chains on the DC only. So then the new board under Matt's leadership can have the strategic discussions that Yvette talked about, but armed with the information. So we have all the information we need in order to make a decision. And of course, get input from members when we have more information.
We might need a motion on that, but let's go ahead and hear from Randy first and then see how we want to move forward.
Hi, so thanks very much, first of all, for the thoughtfulness that's gone into this presentation to John and the staff members and to the entire board. As president of the DC chapter, I cannot tell you how thrilled I would be to have these upcoming conventions in DC for the next 3 years or whatever construct the board decides. It's so important for all the reasons that John outlined and that others have spoken about to have the event in DC. And I would pledge to you that our board, our chapter would do everything we can to fully help you in the planning and the execution of these conventions, to make them really successful, to make them great conventions, important to grow the visibility of SPJ, to grow the visibility of our chapter, and to help journalists and journalism around the country. So you have my full endorsement for this, and we are just thrilled that this would happen, hopefully. Thank you for letting me talk about this.
Absolutely. So the DC chapter, of course, was going to be very instrumental if we were in person there, and had many great ideas that, of course, had to be shelved, but we still had the energy of some DC members on the planning committee, and we thank Randy for facilitating that. Is there any additional input that has not been raised? Mark Sharp. Am I saying your name right? Scarp.
No, you tried twice and it's Scarp.
Got it. Welcome, Mark.
It's all right. It's been a long time. I feel like I'm the Brigadoon of SPJ. I show up about every 10 years or so and then disappear. So it's good to see everybody this morning. Thank you. Randy made a great argument for holding the conventions in DC. And he's very happy about it, and I don't blame him, because it's going to bring exposure to his chapter too. I would bet anybody a beer that after even 1 year in DC, I'll bet there'll be a lot of interesting people wanting to join the DC chapter from that area who may not have considered it before, because SPJ would be on display. and that's one of the best ways to encourage somebody to join. I guess that's my point. Whatever city it's in, John may be right that national membership numbers don't go up because of conventions in a particular city. But I can tell you from the years I was a regional director, each host city did see a bump up in membership in its host chapter after the convention was held. And when you see the latest numbers, anytime you see the latest national membership numbers, I know they're not good, but the decline you're seeing may be slowed somewhat by a growth in membership in a host city. Not many, but it beats nothing. I guess the only other thing I was going to point out was that the three recent years of conventions showed that there was only one attendee difference between Anaheim and Baltimore, 487 and 488. Baltimore, which of course is a skip and a jump from Washington. If the theory that Washington is going to attract a lot of people that other places would not is true, then why wasn't Baltimore far more attended than Anaheim? It wasn't. So again, you could get a dollar's a dollar, and I understand that the society needs to make as financially reasonable a decision as possible. You can get all those dollars from the Washington, D.C. area far more easily than you can from other places. But SPJ's mission isn't just to make money and pick it up only from folks from the East who are proximate by car. SPJ's mission is to serve across the country. Conventions do that. They do that for the local chapters. They do that for the regions. And that's why I voiced what I felt about the rotation, because I feel it really does a lot of good for the society as a whole in a lot of places in this country where SPJ needs to be visible just as much, I could argue, as it is in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Do we have any final comments or questions? Rebecca Aguilar.
First of all, John, thank you so much. You laid out a good foundation here. You make a lot of valid points. I agree with much of what the other people have said, so I'm not going to repeat myself. But one of the things that's very important for journalists today, because as I've said before, I'm part of NHJ, is that sometimes journalists decide to go to the convention because they're killing two birds with one stone. They're going to a conference and they're going on a vacation. You see, when I worked for a TV station, and 7 of them, a lot of times they wouldn't let me go to a convention. I had to take vacation time. So I had to kill two birds with one stone. So, I got inspired at the convention. Sometimes I bring my husband or my kid along and they'd be off, looking at the sites. And then I joined them for the weekend or whatever. So we have to take that into consideration, because many companies today, they're not paying for this. They're saying, take your vacation time. And I hope we consider that, because, I often, and I only got 2 weeks vacation. I often took a vacation time just to go to a conference, because many bosses just, weren't supportive of it. So I just want that to be considered. But thank you, John, for all the work. Your staff has done a great job. Yes, I think there's a lot of research still to be done. And, I just want to thank you for that.
All right, thank you very much. Another valid point. So what's our preference here? Lauren Bartlett?
Do you want a motion? Because I can make one.
I think we could take a motion. Yeah, let's hear it.
So, and I didn't write this down, so I don't have anything to put in chat. I move that we do a member survey to get input from members about whether they would like to have the conference be in DC for 3 years, or if they'd like it to continue to rotate. I move that headquarters staff get information from at least 3 hotel chains about what cost savings we could achieve by continuing to rotate the conference but be in different cities. And I move that if needed, we get additional information about different dates in DC over the 3 years, because we've discussed different dates beyond what is in the confidential proprietary information for the executive session. And
right,
I
we've got-
believe that we get this information by, John, what's a reasonable amount of time? Because you have a conference next weekend. How much time do you want?
1 month maybe.
Okay, I move that we get this information in a month.
All right, we have a 4-part motion on the floor. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board member, thank you, Yvette. Are there any additional questions or comments? Right, Jennifer is taking notes and we'll assume that she was able to get down those 4. We have a question from Taylor. Please unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I was just wanting to clarify, Lauren, did you mention we would want to see the financials for staying in DC for the 3 years as well? You said the hotel chain's traveling, but just want to make sure.
Right. Yeah. The second the last part was additional information about DC, because we have some of that information, the confidential memo, but we've discussed some other dates, and also because of the different chains, they might need to do more research. So yes, that's part of it.
Thank you. Additional question, Rebecca?
Yes, I was just wondering, John, when you're doing your research, are you also going to see if organizations that will possibly, collaborate with, if they're already booked on hotels and maybe they've already cut a deal? I don't know, since we're looking for cost-cutting ways, is that going to be part of your research?
That will be a part of my research. I don't know how far I'll be able to get on that, right? Because of there's lots of different organizations we could consider. And I think board direction on the who would also be important at some point, like which orgs do we want to try to partner with versus others. But I will definitely scan the environment of our major other journalism organizations and the conferences they're doing when and where. So we don't, as Mike Riley's pointed out several times in the chat, we don't want to compete as much as possible against those different activities. So.
And based on some of the activity in chat, if I could once again amend my own motion and hope Yvette will accept this friendly amendment, also to find out what the cost would be for 2 years in DC, 2 years and 3 years.
I'd support that.
2 versus 3.
And 3, both.
Right. All right. We have a multi-pronged Matt Hall, question or comment?
Yeah, for precision, we've asked John to come back with a report for us in a month, but we haven't set a date for the membership survey, or is that rolled in there? I just want to make sure we know what time.
That's rolled into the information that's supposed to come back to us in a month. So it needs to be completed in less than a month so that he can bring us the results in a month.
Okay. Yeah, and then my last statement is I dropped in the chat field what April said, the 4 dates that NABJ has set through 2026. So it'll be good to see when those dates are. NAHJ is partnering with NABJ in 22, and I'm not sure if their agreement extends beyond that in 2024 or another date. I would also ask that we look at, in addition to the major professional journalism organizations, the 2 big student organizations, to see if they have dates set, because I do think that's a great potential partnership that would pay huge dividends going forward, is a major partnership with one or both of them.
All right. I don't think we need to amend the, okay, very good. So we have an amendment on the floor. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Any abstentions? The motion carries, and we will return to this conversation in executive session for board members, and that's only to look at some of the attached dollars that John has already gathered with the 3-year model. So let us move ahead. Thank you, everybody, for that. And again, echoing, thank you, John, for putting together a really comprehensive deep dive into the possibilities. Financial update. This is also in your packet, members. We have a 6-month report from John and Jake Koenig, our controller, that shows that we are now in the black to a positive 20 after earlier predicting we would be a negative 60,000 at this point in the year. Reminder that we're now a calendar fiscal year, so what we have is the first 2 months, and at this point I will just take questions, or probably John, or if Jake is on the call, would be better equipped to answer any questions I should note that the Finance Committee has already looked at this report and asked a lot of questions of both Jake and John, and come away with suitable answers or satisfactory answers. So I think the Finance Committee has confidence that we are moving in the right direction. With that, any questions about the financial report? I would note, John and I had a brief discussion about the financial impact of the virtual conference. What does that look like? He has shared with the, John, do you consider proprietary the amount of sponsorship dollars we have in aggregate?
No, I think you can share that.
So we've brought in about 30,000 in sponsorships based on our current number of 450 roughly. That's about between 18,000 and 20,000 more. So that's 50,000 in revenue. And we have only minor expenses. We have to pay for the voting software. We have a couple of other agreements with folks to provide some amount of compensation for their contributions, but it looks to be a net positive event. Mike Riley, question or comment?
Yeah, I just had a quick question. That 30,000 doesn't include the 25,000 that's earmarked from Google, right? That's separate, because we have Google listed as a sponsor for the conference, but they give 25K, I think, to EIJ for that for the conference every time they sign that contract.
Yeah, that's true. So it's 30 in addition to that.
30 and 25. So we're looking pretty good with a virtual conference. A lot lower expenses. You'll see the board expenses for the year were 0 for the 2 quarters of the year. Because we weren't traveling. So there are, you know, some upsides to the pandemic to counter the many, many downsides. Other questions, comments? Andy says, let's go virtual all the time. I don't think that's going to help the membership numbers too much. All right, if I have no questions, we will then just move forward. And with thanks to Jake and John for good financial management and getting us back in the black. And our next is the strategic plan. So you have board members and other folks on the call you have seen in the past. John's presentation about rolling together all of the input, all of the data, all of the research that we've done over the last 2 years with the Strategic Planning Task Force to understand who we are and help define the future of the organization. So John is going to share that again and just walk through it quickly, and then we'll spend some time talking about the first year plan of action, what we're calling the 2021 annual plan.
Can you see the SPJ's Core 4 on the screen?
We can.
Can you see me switching right now?
Yes, we can.
Yes. All right. So I won't do the entirety of sort of how we got here. I think that's been said and shared many times with this group. And so I just want to hone in on what the task force and the other entities that have helped support the work of this have developed as what are really the core 4, what we're calling, what I casually call it, is the 4 pillars of the strategic plan going forward. So the first pillar being we are champions for journalists. We recognize the achievements of journalists, best practices through our awards program. We educate journalists. We create products and services that helps instill a pride of vocation. We encourage news organizations to build newsrooms that are diverse, equitable, and inclusive, and make staff and management demographic data public on a regular basis. So those are the sort of the overarching objectives falling within that pillar of we are champions for journalists. SPJ are also fighters for the First Amendment. We monitor and fight against efforts to violate the First Amendment through a DC-based advocacy team. We defend journalists through our legal defense funds, and our First Amendment Forever Fund is used as a proactive measure. We increase public awareness and support of the First Amendment through training and education. So we are fighters for the First Amendment. We are also stewards for ethical journalism. We have an ethics response team, ethics hotline, other programming that helps build public trust in media and greater accountability. We promote and advance ethics through a continuously updated code of ethics, the prime ethics code that is taught throughout the country. As our code of ethics state, we encourage journalists to boldly tell the story of the diversity and magnitude of the human experience. So the objective of our future plan is to really step into that code to ensure that we're helping the industry do that as best as possible. And then lastly, we are producers of journalism's future. We proactively design initiatives that amplify new and diverse voices. We provide examination, thought leadership, and resources that support a more sustainable future for journalism. We help prepare the next generation of journalists through our student and young professionals programs. And we embrace, employ, and educate journalists on technology and innovation to build journalism's future. So as a one-page glimpse, this is what we're going to try to do for the next 3 to 5 years and maybe beyond. But this is, we feel as a task force, and I feel as a staff member, and I know my other fellow staff members feel that if we are to do these things, this will be quite an adventurous and cool and impactful next 3 to 5 years for SPJ. And really is something we can drive forward with to build membership, to build alliances, to build success for the entire industry. So what I think we're talking about today is the board's approval of these as the pillars and the objective of our plan. And then I think Patty will share more about the annual plan, which we're also looking for feedback from today as well. But I'll stop sharing that. But is there any, I guess, Patty, I'll hand it back to you to manage the discussion.
Right, so from all of that work, we have drafted a 1-page or 1.5-page bulleted list of what the first year's priorities should be, right? If these are our 4 pillars, and we agree that these are our 4 pillars, then how do we start moving toward activity that support the 4 pillars? And so we tried to put together a realistic list of priorities for the year, and that's the memo that is the 2021 plan. Now it's only September, and so it's not as though the staff and the board would be waiting until January 1 to even move forward, but this would be, take us through next year. One point of conversation that we've had a little bit on email is what this board should do today, and whether we're endorsing whether the current board is voting for the plan, or we're going to recommend it to the next board, Matt's board, to move forward, right? So who's the right decision-making body? Because, in theory, this board could say, yes, we endorse this plan, we vote for this plan, but in 3 weeks' time, 4 weeks' time, when Matt's board starts, that board could say, no, we don't like that part of it, we want to take that out, right? So there's a little bit of, I think we should talk about that. And get some feel for whether what the current board wants to do and what we think is appropriate for the next board. And I'll start with Matt at home.
Thanks, Patty. And I just want to take some time off the top just to say again, thanks to everyone involved in this process. It was a multi-year process. What you saw with John's slide was 4 pillars and 14 bullet points that took months and months and hundreds of people's time and energy. And so specifically, I just want to call it out because we're at a public meeting and they deserve to be called out. Victor Hernandez, who was the first strategic task force chair, did an amazing job to get us halfway there and surveyed a lot of people with a board that consisted of many other hardworking people, including Patty, who was on that board, John, who joined us in the 3rd quarter and was a pretty good closer, to mix my metaphors. And then the other committee members were April Bethia, Kimberly Chin, Mike Riley, Jennifer Royer, Alex Tarquinio, and Yvette Walker. And so big thanks to them for years of work, really, and for getting us to a point which I think we should all be proud of. And just to wrap up, I think that we should endorse this and send it to the board that I will preside over, and that board can take a look at it. And as any new board can, if they want to, open it up and do surgery, they'll be able to. But I think an endorsement here today shows them the importance of it, that we're not waiting, that we do think there's a huge value to it. And so I would make a motion to have it on the floor that we do endorse this. And I would hope that it's a unanimous, strong vote but I'm also open to hearing what people have to say.
So we have a motion on the floor. We need a second.
Second, Riley.
Thank you, Mike Riley is seconded. Now, more discussion. I hope that you did take time to walk through the bullet points. I'm really proud of the work to get it to this page. I think it's a ambitious one-year plan, but a doable one-year plan. Now that we have a very competent executive director and competent staff members to move forward, and things in the office are, let's see, more productive, less contentious. Things are moving forward and we're where we should be as an organization. I do think that this is the right time, and I do think that the bullet points that we put together are the right ones for the coming year. Now, will we hit every mark? Maybe not, but I think we should aim high. Will we get 10 new chapters? Well, let's go for it. Let's try, right? Anyway, I do think that we have a lot of plans in there, but again, think that the task force put together a workable plan that's ambitious, but still realistic. Comments on the one-year plan at all? Any, Rebecca?
First of all, wonderful plan. I mean, it looks very empowering and very encouraging. I would want to add maybe one thing to Champions for Journalists. I like, and I think I'm inspired by develop a training agenda targeting young journalists. What about something that focuses also on mid-career journalists? You know, I mean, in the middle of my career, you know, I switched after 28 years from TV news into freelancing. And, you know, thank God some freelancers took me under their wing to say, okay, this is what you do, Rebecca, here's how you pitch, that kind of thing. You know, because, you know, again, as journalists, and we're not all young, you know, we're still evolving. We're still changing. You know, I went from television to digital, another transition for me, and print. And so maybe we can add something there to embrace that group. Because often, you know, although, you know, I love that we do things for young journalists. I mean, my son is one of those young people. I always sometimes feel like the mid-career people, or the people that, you know, are, you know, later in years, like, I mean, you know, I have 39 years of being a reporter. You know, I never stop learning. I'd like something too. So anyway, just an idea. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Other comments or questions? Lauren Bartlett.
I just also wanted to say what a wonderful job the task force has done and John has done stepping in. I know how hard you've worked. I appreciate the input that you've taken from everyone. And I think we need to vote at this meeting. I think we need to both adopt the plan overall and also should adopt the 2021 plan to start work immediately.
Was that the nature of your motion, Matt, to adopt both pieces, the overarching plan as well as the 2021 annual plan?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right. Any further, you know, in response to Rebecca's suggestion there, I think that's absolutely legit. I'm mid-career too. I hope I don't have a career change, but you never know. And, but we can't do everything in year one, right? And as we move, my personal preference would be to give maximum attention to our young members, our student members, and our early career members, because that's where we are hurting the most for new membership. And it's really where we need to capture the excitement of SPJ for our younger members, give them reasons to join us. And so I would like to see maximum attention there. But certainly as we go forward, we don't want to ignore or neglect the mid-career or late career folks. So are we ready to vote to move this forward? Seeing no other hands, all those in favor of Matt Hall's, I'm sorry, did we have a second on that motion? I didn't capture that. I'm sorry, that was Mike Riley, thank you. We have a motion and a second to move forward the strategic plan and the 2021 annual plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any objections? Abstentions? The motion carries. Thank you very much to everyone involved. This is exciting. Truly exciting that we have a map to go forward, and it's taken a long time, but here we are. And as Billy O'Keefe, the wise Billy O'Keefe said, we're going to go into a convention where we can say, this is the way forward, friends, and stay tuned. We got a lot of good stuff going on for you. All right, moving on to the agenda now. We are going to number 12, the badge proposal. This comes from our freelance community. Hope you had a chance to look at that. It's not so much a badge, that was just the language I used for the agenda, but it is an enhanced membership card that could be used somewhat like a press pass for members who have need of that in news gathering situations. So open the floor to questions or a motion on how we should handle this proposal from Hillary Niles and the freelance community. Maybe I'll call, hi Hillary, nice to see you popping in the screen there. There was a question in advance of the meeting from Lauren Bartlett about any legal red flags. And so John was able to reach our attorney, Mark Balin, and turn over the mic to John to review that.
Yeah, so Mark responded from reading the proposal and said, we have not seen, I'm assuming his law firm has not seen any cases where a credentialing authority was held liable for actions taken by a credentialed party. So most cases involve somebody complaining about actually being denied credentials. So he suggested that it should be made clear to those receiving SPJ credentials what they can and cannot represent regarding the credential. So in my conversation with him, I think it's, there's no reason not to move forward with the proposal from a legal perspective, but as we implement it, we may want to stop at times and get his advice to ensure we're implementing it to the correct letter of the law.
Hillary, since you've joined us, would you like to speak to the proposal? Perhaps just a little more background for folks who are coming new to the conversation.
Sure, thank you, Patty. And thanks for the advanced research on any legal questions about it too, John. I would just, so background, the freelance community originally had proposed that SPJ issue a press badge as an optional benefit that would be available to members for a small fee. And upon further, after further discussion, there was an agreement to actually just kind of simplify it a little bit and lower the stakes a little bit, and by not calling it a press badge, but actually just calling it an enhanced member ID, a photo member ID, and ID card, I should say. So as far as any discussion about like treating it as a credential or representing it as a credential, I would say that the way that we have revised the proposal is actually to avoid even using that word. Because, well, actually, to be honest, we didn't even use the word credential in the first proposal because literally there is no authority within SPJ to offer any press credentials. Credentialing is handled by whatever authorities are in charge of whatever event or venue and so forth. All this is meant to be for journalists to have a visible, physical identification to just help them convince authorities at an event or at a venue that yes, I am press, and be able to just like have it on a lanyard, have it be nice and you know, big and visible with the word press on it, to just be able to kind of flash it as you would flash a badge, but just flash it. All it is in truth is an enhanced member ID card. And the idea as proposed is very much to make it clear to anyone who is signing up to get one that this is not a credential. This is, all this is showing is that you're a member in good standing of the Society of Professional Journalists. That's literally all that it is. It doesn't guarantee anybody access to anything. It doesn't guarantee recognition by whoever you flash it to that you are a journalist, much less how you'll be treated as a journalist, which we know, can't predict that these days. So just trying to like super streamline and simplify this and kind of lower the stakes while still producing for journalists a physical thing that will help them convince any authorities of their professional credentials.
Very good. Thank you very much. Lauren Bartlett.
Thanks, Patty. So I understand and support the idea of having a photo ID card, but the one thing that I'm very concerned about is SPJ has tried for many years to avoid defining a journalist or journalism, and we want to stay away from that. So I actually dug out my SPJ membership card, which I guess with my background is really hard for you all to see. So I can get rid of my background because I didn't realize that that would be the case when I did that. So now you get to see what my closet looks like. On the front, it has the SPJ logo. It has my name, my ID number, and member since Improving and Protecting Journalism. And on the back, it has the number, the contacts for the Ethics Hotline, Legal Defense Fund, FOI, and says the Society of Professional Journalists is dedicated to the perpetuation of a free press as the cornerstone of our nation and our liberty. It has the address, phone number, and then the logo again at the bottom. So putting a picture on the front with the expiration, if you're paying 1, 2, or 3 years, I would be fine with that. I'm concerned about putting on there that you're a member in good standing, because what does that mean? And that to me goes more toward the society is saying something about the individual, which we don't want to do. And I would like to know what other people's thoughts are, because nowhere on the current cards does it say press. It just has the SPJ logo.
Right, so this proposal is to create a membership card that uses some additional signaling.
Right, and what I'm asking our fellow board members, Patty, is what their thoughts are, because I don't know, because it doesn't say press now, if there's any thoughts or concerns by adding that. I'm more comfortable with that than the member good standing portion. And of course, a lanyard, this is like a credit card, so the sorting material, all that, of course.
Right.
Just a quick point, because I recently joined SPJ when I joined the staff, and the card I have does have press on it. It's faded into the background, so you have to really look at it closely. So somewhere along the line, this organization made a decision to do that, and I'm not sure how or when. But this would make it definitely, a new proposal would mean we'd want to make it much more apparent, obviously, than it is now. But.
In that case, thanks for that, John. Then I'm fine with that, but I don't like the wording about member in good standing. And I don't like the idea of having that with a phone number. People could try to think there's a connection or causation, and I'm not comfortable with that.
All right, Taylor.
I have a question on the proposal. It says include clarification that this is not a press badge or press credential. It goes on to specify that. Hillary, can you expand on would that clarification be delivered to the member, separate of the press badge, or would that clarification be on the credential that we're talking about here?
I think what I was picturing was that on whatever web page where the person would be applying for it, it would be articulated, like what this is and what this isn't. So I think it would just be part of the language that explains what the person is applying for and paying for. And then also it would make sense to me, in addition to that application page, if there were a page on the website somewhere that just listed this as as an optional benefit, that it would be clarified in that language as well, not just in the application, but in any description, in any description of length of substance about the benefit, that it would need to, be described what it is and what it isn't. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I was just curious if it was on the ID card, if it was on the website. So it sounds like you're wanting it.
Yeah, I was thinking that it would be on the website. Yeah, thanks.
Rebecca, and then Matt.
Hillary, I like your proposal. I'm a freelancer, and I know I've shown up at places, and thank God most of the people in Dallas know me, but there are people that will stop me, cops, young cops, whatever. So I'd like something to show while all my colleagues out there, they have something to show. I was just wondering, did you check with any of the other journalism organizations that have a freelance community? Have they issued something like this? And if yes, has it been productive? Has it really been helpful? Just wondering about that. And thank you for this too.
Yeah, absolutely. To be honest, as far as other journalism organizations go, to my knowledge, our freelance community within SPJ is pretty unique. And I've actually, I'm not sure that there is a parallel in other freelance community in other organizations. But that said, there are other journalism organizations that issue a similar type of card, in particular NPPA, National Press Photographers Association, I think that stands for. And part of the feedback that we got from our survey of the freelance community this summer was that actually one of the reasons that the whole issue came up is that there was a freelancer who, as many people know, Haston was detained at one point during a protest and had a hard time convincing the cops that he was press and not subject to the curfew. And he recalled having been doing some reporting with a member of NPPA who had this like membership badge from NPPA and had found it helpful for gaining access and for sort of establishing his, establishing himself with the authorities as a professional.
I just wondered, did Haston have any feedback on this?
Sorry, are you asking me or are you asking Haston?
I'm asking Haston, since he was there. Yeah. I'd like his feedback on if he feels that such a card would have been an asset during this time where he's being questioned.
Yeah, can y'all hear me? I think it would have helped. From what I can tell, the police don't necessarily read these things super close when you show them to people. So I think it would have helped just to be able to kind of hold something up and just have that around my neck to identify me. I do know I was on a panel discussion on Wednesday. It was a local SPJ Georgia panel. There was another freelancer on there who used to work for the AJC. He's been covering these protests as well. He was using his AJC badge from like 20 years ago. It's obviously dated and old. He's much younger in the picture, like a totally different person to an extent. He said he had no problem using that. He would hold it up and they would say, "You're good." So I think that it would help. And yeah, the NPPA member I worked with was named Kevin Lyles. He does a lot of stuff for a lot of national outlets. Every time I see him, he has his NPPA badge on. So he seems to see the value in having that, and I think we would as well. I would definitely get one as soon as they came out if we did this.
Thank you for your feedback.
Thank you. So we can move the discussion along. I'd like to just raise a couple of points and make a suggestion on action we might take. First of all, our freelance community has grown dramatically in recent years, and they are loyal SPJ members. The Facebook group, and I'm not sure where I must have pulled these from your report, Hillary. The Facebook group has something like 1,900 members. The Twitter account has 4,200 members. The freelance community is contributing $1,000 to send to support freelancers to attend SPJ 2020. They are planning on their own and executing 3 sessions that I'm sure will be well attended and very valuable at SPJ 2020, all of which is to say our freelance community is engaged and they are a big part of our future, right? Because of the realities of the industry, more and more folks are turning to freelance. So with all of that, I support I don't usually, offer my support at the beginning, and I think perhaps the way to go is if I could get a member to put forward a motion that recommends Hillary's memo to staff, and that staff then will work with Hillary on the wording and on the execution and come back to the next year's board very shortly, maybe even the September meeting, with the particulars of what this was going to look like on the screen when our members apply for it. So I'm basically saying, let's move forward and not delay this unless there's any great philosophical opposition. Leave it to the community and the staff to work out the wording. And all the comments in the chat would be part of the input. Lauren Bartlett.
If I could ask a question and then likely make a motion. Hillary, would you be okay with it not saying member good in good standing and also continuing to keep the legal defense fund and FOI information on there in addition to ethics?
I'm totally in favor of keeping the additional information on. I'm trying to think through why I think that I am totally fine with not having it say a member in good standing. I'm trying to just think through if there's any reason to not say that. The only reason that I had suggested that was just to sort of try to clarify. My only intention in using that language was to reflect the specificity of it as just a membership, like an enhanced membership card. So that's the only reason I had suggested that.
It didn't have that, but it had the expiration date and it had the address and phone number of headquarters like it's on there. You would be okay with it?
I'm okay with that. It just, can anybody think of a reason I shouldn't be? I'm okay with it.
Could there be a compromise? Could it just say member without the in good standing part? Would that clear up your?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And
So
then
the link.
There will be an expiration date on there. Okay, that's it.
Right, because basically you pay for 1, 2, or 3 years, right?
Right.
Okay, so then I could move that we adopted the concept, because not all the wording, in the proposal from the freelance community of an enhanced member ID card that would include a member's photo and other details to be worked out between the freelance community and staff based on guidance from the board.
Thank you. Do we have a second on Lauren's motion? Taylor is the second on that. Do we have additional discussion? Matt Hall.
Yeah, I just had a couple quick questions. I also think it's a great idea. I think the freelance community is huge and active and they're asking for this. We should listen to them. But I do have some questions and that you guys can work out as you do per Lauren's motion, which is smart. I'm wondering if it says press and people aren't press, like professors or PR people, does that make a difference? So I think that's something to think about. Do associates get it? That's a question to answer. They don't? If that's a no, that makes
they don't get a regular membership card, do they? They would get something. John, do they get a membership card?
I'm not aware.
Bob Becker's saying they're not technically members. So that's
yeah, they're not members, so they wouldn't get it.
So the proposal suggests that it would be that the members who would be eligible for this card would be professional, retired, lifetime, post-grad, and college student members.
Okay,
but not
so that takes care of that. Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Hillary. My question about the utility of putting a number for headquarters on there. A lot of times you're going to use these badges are at night when no one at headquarters is going to be there. That's something to consider. And then my two other questions are about cost. $20 sounds fair. That's what NPPA I think charges for theirs. But how much does it cost to make? How much does it cost to make? And then much the way you get like a Vaughn's card on your phone, so you don't have to carry around a wallet or the card. Is there a way to do this digitally? And also I have questions about the subsidy. My last question is about the subsidy. Like $20 doesn't seem like that much to, I think I raised this at an earlier meeting when we discussed this. $20 doesn't seem like a big ask. So So I don't know what kind of subsidy we're talking about there, but I think I would like to see some greater specificity on what that might be and whether it's actually necessary. But I appreciate you guys grabbing the ball and running with it.
And John and I did have a conversation earlier that they'll have to do the particulars. They'll have to look at the actual costs and see if 20 seems reasonable. But what we're voting for here really is to move the concept forward and to pay heed to all the input in chat and offered verbally, but to go forward with the plan. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any objections? Any abstentions?
Riley
And with
is
that, Riley is, I'm sorry,
abstain.
abstain, thank you. And with that, the motion carries, and we thank Hillary for the work on it, and advise you then to work with John and the staff on the next steps. And again, we're going into the conference with another win for our members. So yay, go team. All right, here we go. Next, thank you. Thank you very much. Our next item on the agenda, number 13, is local news memo. This probably need just a little bit of context. This is a summary of the advocacy work being done by this loose new group called Local News. Local News, I'm sorry, I'm losing my note on that.
I think it's Rebuild Local News.
Thank you, Rebuild Local News, which is a loose consortium of a variety of different journalism groups. I would recommend you to hop on a website and take a look at it right now if you're unfamiliar with it. The leading voice in the initiative is Steve Waldman, who's the founder and executive director of Report for America. This is I would call this a white paper. I would call this an aspirational document that lays out a number of things that this group of different journalism organizations could do on the legislative front, on the advocacy front, that would potentially help the business of journalism, protect the business, grow the business, which we all know is greatly beleaguered. And so we, SPJ earlier endorsed one piece of this big plan, and that is we offered public support for the Journalism Sustainability Act, piece of legislation that was introduced into the House in July, and has now something like 52 sponsors, and it offers tax credits that support you as a consumer of news, you as a producer of news, helps a little bit on the hiring front, that the journalism organization that hires or retains journalists would get tax credits. It's 3 different tax credits. I think it's a pretty benign bill myself, and I okayed our participation as giving that the thumbs up. That's as much as we've done. This longer white paper has many other ideas in it, and possible ways forward to support the field of journalism. They're asking for us to put our name on their document, to add our logo to their site. At this point, the conversation hasn't gone beyond that, but I did not feel like I, as president, should give it a green light unless we talked about it. So, thoughts? Bob Becker has a thought. Go ahead, Bob Becker.
I am among the people who are very troubled by government funding or sponsorship of independent media. But that said, I think there are ample arguments for that position. There is a glaring missing piece here. There is a bulletin point on about page 8 about local media being able to get paid for their content when it's used on other sites. And that seems to me to be one of the biggest issues that the media need to overcome, so that small media and all media generally get paid for what they've produced. And this proposal at this point just gives passing acknowledgement that that's an issue. And I think that would be a major help to local media if they could, like the creatives in music and art get royalty payments through a clearinghouse for their work, newspapers and broadcasters should get royalty payments when Google and all of the others take their work and use it. And without a major drive in that direction, this proposal is missing a major piece.
Fair point. Other groups, of course, have raised that issue, the use of content on Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's not, it's not a 100% comprehensive catalog of everything that could happen to support journalism, but it is an interesting laundry list. And at this point, it's really, do we want to put our name on it or do we want to take a pass? This seems like, there's so much here, really, if you walk through it, it's a lot. And perhaps this is something that we just want to keep watching, see what direction it goes. It could be something that when we have more of a DC presence would be an appropriate place for, it lays out a bunch of news organizations that we might want to be in conversation with as these ideas play out. Unlike you, Bob, and others on this board, I love almost everything in this proposal. I am not afraid of government investment in the world of news, and the paper lays out places where that has happened and been successful and could be expanded. And absent other ideas on how to save the world of journalism, I think talking through and examining a lot of these ideas, the time has come. That's my own personal view, but I am but one of 9 board members. So Mike Riley is hesitant. Matt Hall has a question.
Yeah, I would just say there's
Taylor, thank you.
I'm sorry, Taylor, did you have your hand up before me? Okay. There's a lot in this proposal. I spent a lot of time looking at it and made copious notes. I mean, you're talking about a $600 million handout to a struggling industry, but it does, I don't struggle as much as Bob does with government support for journalism. I think we all need the help we can get, but it does trouble me. We just saw Stars and Stripes yesterday almost get upended. And do we want to do that every year? Like we want to fight about our funding every year? That seems like a fight that we would have to get into if we walked down this path. And then specifically, you're talking about a tax on internet advertising in here, changing the WARN Act from 60 days to 6 months just for one industry, forcing federal advertising budgets to go through local media. I don't know. I think there is some good ideas in here, but there's like too many ideas. I think a better approach is what we did, Patty, when you had, here's a bill. Do we support this bill or not? I think we can support the cause and report for America's effort, but it's troubling to me. Some of the details are really troubling. And just overall, like, I just, if the industry is going to move towards it, I think it's a bigger discussion than this document.
I get that, Matt. And here's my pushback. This has been in the works for 15 to 20 years since the emergence of the internet. Journalism has started to spiral, and so many news organizations have been hurt. And when is the appropriate time for SPJ to get serious about this issue and do anything to help, right? This has always been a glaring absence in our menu of things we do, in my estimation, that the industry, we support journalists and journalism. Well, they need places to do that journalism. And I don't know that this is the right vehicle to attach to, but Steve Waldman's a super smart guy, and he's built a really innovative organization with Report for America. So I'm just saying, I love the topics. I love the thinking. I love that this conversation is live, and I would love for SPJ to be part of it in a meaningful way. So there's where I am. And I saw Taylor's hand next. Thank you.
I don't support signing this. I think we should pass. The big thing for me is I'm just troubled by any, the being able to preserve our editorial independence. And I know the policy points out that they would take steps to ensure that we have our independence, but I don't think that's practical. And I also don't think, I think the perception issue is a major problem. I mean, I think just like we've seen with other things, it's not just about do we actually have that editorial independence, but how does the public perceive our relationship with government and our ability to cover them? And this is an example of where I think it blurs too many lines. But I do think that there are some good ideas in here, and that I would support taking, you know, certain steps individually rather than the whole proposal. But my biggest concern would be the editorial independence issue.
Okay, thank you. Yvette.
Because we have so many questions about this, putting our name on it now without getting these questions answered from the source, from the founders of this, I think would be premature. You know, maybe there's, maybe we believe in a lot of it, but maybe there's an opportunity to have a discussion with these groups, or with the groups involved, or have a larger table discussion if we wanted to go that far. I just feel like we have enough concerns right now from people that I would not be comfortable putting our name on it just yet. I think there's a lot of pieces of it, as we've talked about, that we agree on, but there's enough that we don't.
Right, good point. So, you know, the sentiment that DC representation would be the way to go here, right? If we have a staff member who is the point person to be engaged with the Steve Waldmans of the world and all the various organizations that are working together, that seems appropriate. I don't know how quickly we'll be able to get to that point, but let's leave it there unless anybody has a motion. It sounds like the sentiment of the board is not in for a full sign-on at this point.
I think that sounds appropriate. I would just add, Patty, if you want to connect me with Steve via email, you know, I'm happy to take up the ball and keep conversing with him on the board's behalf.
Right, right, absolutely. And there might be a way to connect a committee leader or some other leadership of the organization to be kind of part of the continuing conversation, and even as we seek a DC presence. You know, we do have a DC lawyer, obviously, already, and we are part of a, John, help me with the acronym. I always forget the acronym of the groups that come together once a month.
News Media Organizing Group or something. It's NMOG.
Yeah, NAMOG.
And
no, that's an
News Media for Open Government. That's what it is.
NAMOG. It really flips off the tongue, and I've gone to like 12 of their meetings. But we are in conversation with other groups constantly that have these kinds of priorities or take up these kinds of issues, specifically looking at legislation that has an impact on the world of media. And so I just hope that we can expand that. I just think it's really important that this group be out front, try to take some leadership in the in addressing the business side of the world of journalism. All right, and with that, we are moving next to committee reports. So thanks everyone for thoughtful contributions there. We have all the reports. Late breaking news, the international community did not get the memo to submit a memo, and so only were able to put that together today. It is in your Dropbox, but only just as we were starting this meeting. So don't expect that anybody has read that, but I do hope that you were able to take a look at the committee memos. Otherwise, I'm not going to ask each committee person to address, but I think the way to go through here is just to walk through the list. I have 1 or 2 comments on each of the committee reports, and then ask you if anybody else has comments or questions. So first on my list, awards and committees, awards and honors. I think they had an exceptional year. They launched our 3C contest. They have added some categories for the upcoming SDX and MOEs that I think will be meaningful recognition of reporting that's related to COVID and to inequities in American life and culture. They are building out taking upon themselves to support the Fellows site with a build out and make that more interactive, which I'm super excited about. That's work in progress. And they are working on a celebration for Mark of Excellence, decided to take that out of the SPJ conference and make that its own event. So hats off to Sue and Andy, Sue Kopenkachef, I always say Katchef, and Andy Schatz, who were in leadership roles for that last year. Any questions or comments for either Andy or Sue, who are both on the call? So lots of good work from that group of very industrious folks. Next, we have the Ethics Committee. I think I'm going in the right order here. I'm happy to see that an Ethics Week is still in the works, but haven't seen much on that. So hope that that comes to fruition, Mr. Hall, in the month of October. A desire to publicize our hotline more, and I think that's a really good idea. It is well used, but there are constant ethics questions, and they're very good at quickly responding to those. And they are working on a training program ready to launch, but took a pause to get that to the finish line. So thank you to Lynn Walsh and her committee. I would only make one note there, and this can go in the minutes, that it lists still Mike Farrell as a member, and he is deceased. So we want to take that out of their memo. Any questions about the ethics report? Moving on to the FOI committee, headed by Paul Fletcher in the last year. They have a suggestion to look into the possibility of a competition for research in journalism that's related to FOI matters, in as much as some previous members had been doing that in their universities. So they're hoping that they can find someone who's interested in making a proposal to our First Amendment Forever Fund to support some research in that regard. And they are suggesting a advocacy toolbox, a kit that people could refer to on FOI matters. And that sounds like a smart idea, perhaps working with Mike Riley. With the existing toolbox, adding that as another page or another offering. So thank you to Paul and the folks there. And we've recognized Catherine in the past, but I want to give a special recognition to Catherine Foxhall for all of her work as it relates to the role of PIOs in our federal government and other governmental entities. Questions on that? Want to recognize next our Journalism Education Committee, headed by Becky Talent. They took a strong pivot into the digital world as COVID descended and created 10 videos to support the Press for Education initiative that's been with us for a couple of years. And kudos on that. Right now, they are working on identifying colleges that have underrepresented students to push this kind of programming to. And I think that's a great initiative, especially as we try to identify colleges where we can make a difference, start a new chapter, or build up our chapter strength. So that's good to know that that's there. And thank you to the membership, or excuse me, the Education Committee. Any comments or questions for Membership Committee? Very active in the past year. Colin DeVries and a cast of thousands, apparently, have many good ideas to help us on the membership front, both small and big. And I'm really proud, I'm really gratified that Colin and that group of folks are working very closely with Caroline at headquarters. I think in the past, sometimes we've had kind of a, an us and them, the volunteers and the staff. And I think we don't have that anymore in that lane. It seems as though we're working together, we're working productively, and ideas are coming to the surface that can be implemented and discussed and move forward on the membership front. And I do hope and pray that that's a big, big priority in the coming year, because it's certainly something that needs big attention. Questions? Colin is on. Does anybody have a question, comment for Colin? All right, moving on then. Next on our list is the Legal Defense Fund. The Legal Defense Fund was very busy last year as well. We had 72 asks come through the committee. That was up from 50 some the year before. Let's see, 55 the year before and 39 the year before that. So we've had, I think that indicates that more people are aware of our Legal Defense Fund and are bringing matters to us. So that's good momentum. And I thank Hagit Lamore for leading that, that committee for a number of years. And of course, our lawyers at Baker Hotsteller for bringing those cases and packaging them up for us to look at. And so that's an opportunity, I think, as we move forward to continue to sing the praises of our Legal Defense Fund possibilities and engage our new Washington, D.C. person or initiative in supporting all of that. Questions for LDF? Next was the Resolutions Committee. Its work is short and intense, right? Called into service really just in support of the resolutions that come forward. So thank you to Michael and the team he's working with for getting that in good order and really devoting a lot of time in the last couple of weeks to paying attention to all the ins and outs needed to bring those to our delegates at the convention. Lastly, we had a report from the Diversity Committee, and happy to see that they have a slate of new programs coming down the pike that they're going to launch after the convention. And I'm sorry, Rebecca, I wrote, there we go. The Conversation Starters videos. Sounds like a great idea for online engagement on high-level issues related to diversity in coverage and in newsrooms. Would also, yes, suggest that you continue in conversation with Michael Koretsky as he works on the Race and Gender Hotline initiative to see how you guys can work together for success on that. Questions for Rebecca on the Diversity Committee? All right, and I'm sorry that I was not able to take a look at the international communities memo, but want to also acknowledge El Tusi and Dan Kabitsky for their work on that initiative. They were very energetic in this year of COVID. They did a lot of online programming. They launched a series of webinars. They were very well produced. I was able to attend a couple of them, bringing on journalists known for their international, their work in the international realm in conversation, and they were really rich conversations, and I would recommend them to you. I think they live on our YouTube channel, don't they, John? Yeah, okay, very good. And we've already heard from the freelance community, sorry. Obviously, they were active in bringing us the proposal that we've just endorsed and bringing a lot of people into conversation about how to be an effective and successful freelance journalist. And we appreciate all the ways they have built out that opportunity for members and non-members. I really think it does kind of put a pin in the map for SPJ as really caring about freelancers. Comments or questions for Hillary? Hillary has her hand up, go ahead. Muted, you're muted.
Yep, sorry about that, thank you. There's one issue that I wanted to bring to the attention of the board and request assistance with, which is the sort of policy proliferation that we're seeing right now in state governments and pending federal legislation regarding employment misclassification. In other words, well, specifically in California, it's taken the shape of a bill called AB 5, which is now was signed into law. And there's also pending federal legislation called the PRO Act. The legislation purports to attempt to address the issue of employment misclassification when people who are essentially employees are misclassified as independent contractors, so that the company doesn't have to pay all the benefits and pay unemployment insurance and take on the extra costs of having an employee. And that's a legitimate issue in journalism and in every industry, frankly. But the problem that we are experiencing as freelancers, as independent contractors and sole proprietorships, is that this legislation is actually making it illegal for us to run our businesses. Literally illegal for us to run our businesses and make a living as an independent journalist. It's also making it illegal for newsrooms to hire freelance journalists. So it's really having a devastating effect on our livelihoods and also on the industry as a whole. The freelance community has grown a lot in recent years, as Patty articulated, and I think that the stage that we're getting to now is we're being looked to for advocacy on this issue. And due to our sort of still nascent growth, that's new territory for us. And we could use some assistance and guidance with that advocacy. But also, I wanted to run this issue up the chain because I think that it is profound enough, again, not just for freelance journalists, but for journalism as an industry. I think that it's profound enough to merit a unified response from the organization as a whole, not just from the freelance community. So I just wanted to bring it up and request perhaps if there could be a liaison from the board who could just work with us to help help us with the advocacy, because this is new to us, and also to help us navigate the national organization so that we can figure out what a proper response would be from SPJ as a whole.
I think appropriately a response should come from Matt or John on that, that being a future priority. I mean, an immediate need, but right. Matt, what could the organization do?
I'm happy to work with you on that, Hillary. We'll figure it out.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank you very much.
Contact.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
All right, super. Thanks for raising that issue. All right, and let's see. With that, we have got, the RCs. Sorry, I've got one more to go through, and that would be the regional coordinators.
I think Lauren had a question on that.
Yeah, I've got a question for Hillary. Sorry,
sure, go ahead.
The growth of the community, the freelance community, is wonderful on social media. And I was wondering if you've done any outreach to our non-members to try to get them to join, or if that's something maybe the membership committee could help you with.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, we have been in touch with Colin, and one of our board members from the freelance community is also on the membership committee. So we're trying to work with the membership committee to help figure out to accomplish what you're saying, and also to understand, we have a lot of resources that are available to non-members and other resources that are only available to members, and we're trying to understand and get a little bit more strategic and deliberate about making those decisions. So I appreciate the question and the suggestion, and that is something that we're working on. Kind of slow motion working on it, but definitely working on it. It's on the radar.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. I did want to lastly mention the Regional Coordinators Committee. Jane, thank you very much for your leadership there. And the primary takeaway there is that all of the regions are thinking about what they should do in the spring. Should they begin planning for in-person conferences? Should they consider virtual conferences? And I would just hope that they make one of those two choices and don't abandon the conference construct altogether. That would be my preference, but glad to know that folks are talking about it. Let's let Jane have a word there, please.
I don't think anybody is going to abandon the idea of conferences. We're all very much in favor of conferences. It's just when we chose to eliminate the conferences this year because of COVID, we were not thinking that it might keep going long enough to cause a problem in 2021. So that's something that we're addressing right now, and we're on top of it. I also want to say we do have someone willing to take the Region 7 regional coordinator position. It's kind of last minute, but I think we're there. So I'm not going to announce the name until we're absolutely sure, but I'm reasonably sure. So I think we're all together again. Thank you very much for all your support, Patty and Lauren and everybody else. Thanks.
Thanks very much. You guys are an important part of the SPJ world, and really appreciate that you're hanging in there and moving us forward. All right, any questions about any of the committee reports or the work of the committees, communities, or RCs? Rebecca.
This is kind of geared to John. John, when you're talking to these hotels, it was just something that came up. Have they written in something about the pandemic, if the pandemic continues, that kind of language? Because, you know, as we're talking about regionals and the nationals, is there language in there that protects us or allows us to squeeze out if they say, hey, you know, there is no, you know, the pandemic continues and it's going to get worse or whatever? I just wondered. Thank you.
It's a great question. That would be during the contracting phase, and we would definitely seek to include in there a provision for in case of a communicable disease, such as coronavirus, as we faced before. The problem with a lot of organizations is we were protected against almost everything else but that for some reason, and that's why it took forever for us to really kind of negotiate out of that. But yes, going forward, and I'm sure the hotel's already prepared for that, but we will ensure that we do have almost every base covered you can think of that would cause us to have to cancel the event.
And can I follow up with another question, or just maybe a suggestion?
Yep.
You're going to be looking at all this language that's going to be appearing, or maybe that you suggest to hotels, or I don't know, maybe share it with the chapters and the regional coordinators who also are thinking of possibly having conferences next year. Things to look out for as, you know,
Sure.
while they are also trying to put something together face-to-face. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion. And I know that Kirin, our new director of education, and I have a lot of thoughts about how we can support the regional coordinators as they pull off these events. They're very important events to SPJ, and we want to be helpful. So that would definitely be part of that.
Very good. Jane has another comment.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yes, indeed, please work with us because, of course, I'm in the most expensive region, but Region 2 is also can also be pretty expensive, and we really do need, we may need some help with that sort of thing. So thank you, John.
Jane, we can set up a meeting in the next, once we get on the other side of the national conference.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren.
All right, thank you so much to everyone who joined today's meeting. We have reached the part of our agenda for public comment. So if you would like to make a comment, a question, now is your opportunity. And I'll just watch for hands. And if we start to get busy here, I'll ask you to put it in chat. Who would like to speak? Colin DeVries. Let's see. John, are you able to unmute Colin? He's not able to do that.
No, I cannot, unfortunately.
Colin, keep working on it. Maybe leave the call and come back. That happens, that sometimes is helpful. Do I have another person who would like to be recognized? Oh. Colin, I just saw your mute go off. Colin DeVries, are you hearing me? Colin, are you hearing me?
I see Deborah Kroll has her hand raised. I don't know if that's...
All right, let's go with Deb, and then Colin, I would suggest just leave and come back to the call, like exit and come back. Deb Kroll, welcome.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make a lot of the board meeting, but I've been seeing a lot of the emails going back and forth with the suggestion about sticking to one city for a few years. And I'm assuming that you've all seen Mark Scarp's comments, you know, former national board member and longtime local leader here at the Valley of the Sun chapter. And as a coordinator, RC for Region 11, I'm pretty much in agreement with Mark. I think it's a good idea to look at ways to save money and to make things more streamlined. But perhaps instead of sticking to one city, which makes it really hard for those of us west of the Mississippi, and especially our far west chapters who have been really diligent about coming to national, to make it even harder on them, perhaps we could go back to signing an agreement with a chain and then perhaps working out a deal to be to be, say, Washington every 4 years, or because it's really important to be in Washington from time to time. But to continue moving around between the 4 geographic sections of the U.S., you know, Northwest, Northeast, etc. But I'm really glad that somebody's thinking about how better to run these events. But it just kind of, when I saw that, it really kind of struck me as, well, okay, us Western journalists don't really count again. And I know that's not the case, but as someone who was shocked and amazed when the Washington Post actually referred to one of my Arizona Republic articles. Usually it's the other way around. Usually they'll take one of my Arizona Republic articles, rewrite it, maybe look at some of my sources and present it as them, back East media. It just kind of was it was a good thought, a good idea, but I think there's a better way to do that to save money. But anyways, thanks a lot, and I'll
Colin DeVries.
Join the meeting.
Thanks very much, Deb. Appreciate your comments and your input on that. And congrats on your latest career move. And great that you're getting picked up by the Washington Post. Colin DeVries, I heard you come back in. Do you want to speak now?
Hey, I'm back. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you.
Okay. Sorry about that. My Bluetooth is...
No worries. Go ahead.
So I just wanted to raise a point that has come across a couple times recently about membership dues. Bob Shapiro sent a note, and he actually spoke in this forum back in June about a lot of the things that he's hearing in New Jersey. I'm also hearing this from Region 9 too, that members are worried about the dues coming next year, or when they have to renew again. And there's concern that some of the chapters might see a drop off in membership just because they might not be able to cover the dues for whatever pandemic related or employment in general related issue that might have come up. So I was just wondering if there's any movement or discussion about either allowing members who might have joined at a promotional rate renew at the same rate next year, or allowing some sort of a discounted rate in the midst of the pandemic.
Thank you, Colin. I think the next board can take that up. You know, in the fall, John and Jay Koenig will be working on the year ahead budget, the fiscal 2021 budget, which will have a line for membership revenue, and perhaps they can crunch numbers in different ways to see what that looks like. And if we're gonna, you know, either have a flat or a declining revenue figure there, give us some consideration of how that would be replaced. So thank you for that input. Other thoughts, other comments or questions from anyone else on the call? Andy Schatz.
You got a chance to thank a lot of people. I think that you deserve thanks as well on this meeting. And I also want to just put it out there to the whole board. When I looked at your president's report, I did laugh when you said it would be a boring year. It was a turbulent year, but then I look at what was accomplished and I thought that was great. So good job to you, Patty, and to the whole board.
Thanks very much, Andy. Hazel Becker.
Hi. Thanks for taking a minute to listen to me. As you guys do a lot, I know. I was really pleased by the discussion and the support around freelancers. And hats off to Hillary for picking up on something that came up very suddenly this year, but that has been nagging at freelancers for a long time. I think the issue ahead that she spoke about is part of a bigger structure of journalism issue that also came up in the Saving Local News discussion. And I don't know where it all ends up, but I hope, Matt, that SPJ will stay at the forefront of that discussion. There are going to be more freelancers. There are still going to be freelancers by choice. Lots of us. And these are the people who have stepped forward this year to put together training and discussions for freelancers not by choice. So when it comes down to talking about whether the government's going to come in now and make it so that we can't do the work anymore as independent journalists, I hope SPJ will be there for the freelancers. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hazel. One thing I'll say is I only got to know you and Bob in recent years and really appreciate your many, many contributions to SPJ. And you are a model of the squeaky wheel that gets the grease. And I mean that in a good way, right? Because you advocated for our growing population of freelancers to get more attention at our conferences in the last couple of years when I started to get more involved in conference planning. And then, of course, you have the numbers to prove it. It wasn't just that Hazel wants a bunch of programs just for her, right? That we have a population of folks that we're serving. So thank you for your advocacy on behalf of freelancers. Matt Hall had his hand up.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Hazel. Eloquent as always and on point as always. Clearly the freelance community, both in capital F, capital C, what we have and more broadly is growing and important. AB 5, which Hillary referenced earlier, was a law that passed that really restricted freelance work in California. And I and others, including many of the leaders at the local California chapters, rallied, and the governor just signed yesterday an amendment to that, which makes it not easier for all journalists, but easier for many journalists to do their jobs. So on my radar, and thank you to you and to all for the focus on freelancers.
Any other comments? Any other input? All right. Seeing no additional hands, we thank everybody for joining us today. We thank staff, especially for being here on a Saturday. And I do need a motion for us to move into executive session to handle one additional matter that's related to the price tag of being in Washington, D.C. For 3 years.
So moved, Riley.
Second. Thank you. So we have Mike Riley with Lauren seconding a move into executive session. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? And with that, we are adjourning the open part of the meeting. We will come back at the very end to report out anything that might be decided during executive session. But if you're not going to be sticking around, we'll see you at SPJ 2020 next Saturday and Sunday. So thanks very much. Thanks, and we'll leave it at that. So just everybody stay on.
We are recording.
Very good. So we're coming out of executive session at 3:08 p.m. The board took no additional action on the plan for future conferences, but discussed some of the financials. And with that, we thank everybody who participated in today's meeting and board activities and SPJ activities all year long. And we look forward to seeing you next weekend at SPJ 2020. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Patty.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
And John, thank you.
Thanks,
Adios, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.